single parents, aren't rich, and I argue because they are mostly of color, they will seldom get to see in themselves the awesomeness that I see in them. Because what I see in them is myself, or what would have been myself. I am the daughter of two hardworking, college-educated African-American parents who chose careers as public servants. My father, a minister, my mother, an educator. Wealth was never the primary ambition in our house. Because of this lack of wealth, we lived in a neighborhood that lacked wealth, and henceforth a school system that lacked wealth. Luckily, however, we struck the educational jackpot in a voluntary desegregation program that buses inner city kids, black and brown, out to suburban schools, rich and white. At 5 years old, I had to take an hour-long bus ride to a faraway place to get a better education. At 5 years old, I thought everyone had a life just like mine. I thought everyone went to school and were the only ones using the brown crayons to color in their family portraits, while everyone else were using the peach-colored ones. At 5 years old, I thought everyone was just like me. But as I got older, I started noticing things like, how come my neighborhood friends don't have to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go to a school that's an hour away? How come I'm learning to play the violin while my neighborhood friends don't even have a music class? Why were my neighborhood friends learning and reading material that I had done 2 to 3 years prior? You see, as I got older, I started to have this unlawful feeling in my belly, like I was doing something that I wasn't supposed to be doing, taking something that wasn't mine, receiving a gift, but with someone else's name on it. All these amazing things that I was being exposed to and experiencing, I felt I wasn't really supposed to have. I wasn't supposed to have a library, fully equipped athletic facilities, or safe fields to play in. I wasn't supposed to have theater departments with seasonal plays and concerts, digital, visual, performing arts. I wasn't supposed to have fully resourced biology or chemistry labs, school buses that brought me door to door, freshly prepared school lunches, or even air conditioning. These are things my kids don't get. You see, as I got older, while I was grateful for this amazing opportunity that I was being given, there was this ever-present pang of, but what about everyone else? There are thousands of other kids just like me who deserve this too. Why doesn't everyone get this? Why is a high-quality education only exclusive to the rich? It was like I had some sort of survivor's remorse. All of my neighborhood friends were experiencing an educational train wreck that I was saved from through a bus ride. I was like an educational Moses screaming, "Let my people go to high-quality schools." I'd seen firsthand how the other half was being treated and educated. I'd seen the educational promised land, and I could not for the life of me justify the disparity. I now teach in the very same school system from which I sought refuge. I know firsthand the tools that were given to me as a student, and now as a teacher, I don't have access to those same tools to give to my students. There have been countless nights when I've cried in frustration, anger, and sorrow because I can't teach my kids the way that I was taught, because I don't have access to the same resources or tools that were used to teach me. My kids deserve so much better. We sit and we keep banging our heads against this term, achievement gap, achievement gap. Is it really that hard to understand why these kids perform well and these kids don't? I mean, really. I think we've got it all wrong. I think we, as Gloria Ladson-Billings says, should flip our paradigm and our language and call it what it really is. It's not an achievement gap. It's an education debt for all of the foregone schooling resources that were never invested in the education of the black and brown child over time. A little-known secret in American history is that the only American institution created specifically for people of color is the American slave trade. And some would argue the prison system, but that's another topic for another TED Talk. The public school system of this country was built, bought, and paid for using commerce generated from the slave trade and slave labor. While African Americans were enslaved and prohibited from schooling, their labor established the very institution from which they were excluded. Ever since then, every court case, educational policy, reform has been an attempt to retrofit the design rather than just stopping and acknowledging we've had it all wrong from the beginning. An oversimplification of American educational history. All right, just bear with me. Blacks were kept out, the whole slavery thing. With the help of philanthropic white people, they built their own schools. Separate but equal was okay. But while we all know things were indeed separate, they were in no ways equal. Enter Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas in 1954. Legal separation of the races is now illegal. But very few people pay attention to all of the court cases since then that have undone the educational promised land for every child that Brown versus Board intended. Some argue that today our schools are now more segregated than they ever were before we tried to desegregate them in the first place. Teaching my kids about desegregation, the Little Rock Nine, the Civil Rights Movement is a real awkward moment in my classroom when I have to hear the voice of a child ask, if schools were desegregated in 1954, how come there are no white kids here? These kids aren't dumb. They know exactly what's happening and what's not. They know that when it comes to schooling, Black lives don't matter, and they never have.